Okay, first repair video on the 7800. I've done a fair amount of stuff to it, but other than greasing it and oiling the chains and the air filter, the service work is done on it. The air filter's there in the box. I got some new hoses. I can get 2 new steering hoses and I think it's a return hose out of the valve stack. Goes back up to the hydraulic pump. Or no, maybe it's the pressure hose. Must be the pressure hose. But anyway, it was dripping pretty good, and you can see there's just bean dust and everything was stuck to it. So I took all that off, or took those hoses off, got some new ones made. What else? Let's see. All service work done. I've done some odds and ends, little repairs and whatnot. This is the one. There's 3 big projects I got to do to it. I was figuring on 2 of them. This is the first one, which is just kind of a pain in the butt. Change the main drive propulsion belt up on the engine. The 3-rib belt runs over and it runs it, and I'll show you here in a minute, runs a big jack shaft that runs behind the cab there, and that belt was in bad shape, and the idler arm needed new bushings put in it, which I did because it had leaned over enough it actually made that belt, I don't know if I went to start it up or something when one of these notches out of here is all lined up or something. It actually jumped the ribs over ribs. It was only running on 2 bands. So I got some new bushings put in that arm, and I'm going to show you putting that back together here in a minute. Most of this little stuff I haven't done a video on, just, changing a belt here or there or something. Going to do videos of the bigger stuff. Second biggest thing is the straw walkers, but I'd mentioned that earlier. Got to work them over. And then thing had a miss to it, or it's kind of a miss, and when you shut it off you hear it hissing. Turns out the number 1 cylinder, luckily it's the head on this side, not the back head, but the head on this side's got a burnt valve in it, so I got to pull the head off of it and take it up to the machine shop and have the valves ground in it. But that's not the end of the world. These heads doesn't look like it'd be too hard to get off. A couple hours I can have it off and back ground, but there's about a 3-week wait time. The machine shop's so busy, so I gotta move it to the back of the shop and park it before I do that. In case any of you are wondering, Farmall H, they're trying to find a decent crankshaft to sell me. They were a salvage yard, took 5 crankshafts over to the machine shop, and all of them are cracked, so I'm waiting to hear back to find some good ones. So anyway, that's where we're at on the belts. I don't have that big belt yet. I got the bushings, just picked up the bushings, got them put in. Still waiting on the belt to get here in the mail. I ordered it from Abilene Machine. They can still get about all the belts for these combines. I think AGCO probably could too, but they'd be a lot more expensive through AGCO, and no more than I'm going to use it. Here's the biggest Christmas gift I got this year. Milwaukee electric grease gun, M18. I haven't used it yet. I'm going to use it today though. 18 volt, 2-speed gearbox in it, how fast it can put grease out, and then you can set this dial here to how many pumps of grease you want it to go on one pull of the trigger. Like if I want to put 5 pumps in a certain circuit, I set that on 5, pull the trigger, and it puts grease out, and then that's it, and then it stops. So it makes it pretty easy. It's got a light on it too. I'm really excited about that one. But anyway, okay, now this thing's a real pain in the butt to work here. Dad said, and I believe in the what little bit I worked on the 7800 in this engine compartment, that it is easier to work on the 7800 and the 7600, because 7600 is only 45-inch wide separator, 7800 is a 52-inch. And they set the engine 7 inches that way in the 7800, and this gives you more room to work. But anyway, there's going to be a lot of fumbling around with parts, so I probably won't. I'll just show you step by step really, but I got to take this idler arm and this pin here, and I don't know how that light's going to work with the camera, but anyway, take that, and it bolts onto this piece of C-channel right here, and then that spring runs up, so I'll put that on and show you what it looks like. Okay, I got the arm on the pivot. Got that cotter key in it. Now we got to get this spring. This is the tensioner here. This rod here, hand in there, runs through the square block on the end of that pivot down in there. Probably can't see that, but it does. Luckily that pivot comes down to a where was I going with that? Against the frame rail there, so that rod doesn't fall through. So what we're going to try to do, take this spring and push it down over the top like this. I don't know why they didn't use a pull spring, but they didn't. But anyway. Now that thing's pushed down, then you got to get it in this piece of makeshift C-channel they got here, and there's a bolt, a 1/2 inch bolt. I got a new one because the old one is about half wore through. It runs through here, and that. Oh, then you got to put this collar on. If I can push down that hard, keep everything lined up. Good, that came out. Well, I'll come back to it here when I get it, because it's going to be some fight. Okay, after piddling at this for about a half an hour, I finally got it in there, and here's what it did. I pulled the spring and the rod out, and the rod's got a 1/2 inch bolt in it, or that goes through it. I took the spring, slipped it over the rod, and took the collar and slipped it over so that I could take this small alignment punch, slip it through the hole, and then I was able to take that, push down on that, and collapse the spring and line the rod or the pipe up, run down through that block down in there on the pivot arm, able to push that down and collapse it enough. And I was able to get it collapsed enough to where, so what I do next? Okay, I took then once I had that collapsed, I pushed it so the pipe was in, it was being held right here by this piece, and then I took this pry bar and wedged it on top of that, I don't know if you see that or not, that collar right here, and had that wedged in here like that, and I had it wedged up in there to hold it down. And then the pipe, when I was on the collar with the spring, then the pipe was free to move, and I was able to wiggle the pipe around enough and get it lined up with the bigger alignment punch, which fell down on the floor there, and get it shoved through. And I had to take, here it is, hiding right in plain sight. Stupid trouble light. Magnets on these things are never strong enough. And they make this the cheapest trouble lights. But anyway, then this bracket just goes on here like this. And I gotta put that back on, just kind of help steady the top of this. But anyway, that's how that's done. That's about all the work I can do on this until I get the propulsion belt that comes in. Oh, and show you this propulsion belt runs over the engine pulley, and there's actually a shaft. This belt on this side, everything that goes on this propulsion belt is transmitted to that side of the machine to move the combine forward. And then this other 3-rib belt right here, which engages the separator on the machine, it has it runs this way through these two bearings right here, and then it runs down and it drives several things over here. Or maybe it just drives, I guess it just drives a cylinder drive is the only thing it drives on this side, runs a cylinder. But then it also transmits to a shaft that runs inside of the other shaft that runs out this way. And so there's a shaft inside of a shaft, and that runs the beater shaft and the rest of the machine. And you can, there's a 2-bolt, takes two, I think they're actually 9/16 bolts. They're a real funny size, because it took a 13/16 on the head of the bolt and a 7/8 on the nut of the bolt. And they run this and you can split those two off and get there's about 3/4 of an inch of clearance, because you can slide that inner shaft that way some, and you can get that thing, split that shaft right there in the middle, and then you can, if you need to change one of these belts, you can wiggle that shaft, or you can squeeze the belt in between the shaft and you bolt it back together. It's not the funnest job in the world. You're leaning over the engine, and you can. The 7800, I think the doors line up better in the back. There's 2 doors in the tank you can take out and reach this maybe a little better. But between this, and then reaching in from the cab, you can get them changed. But anyway, that's how that's done. I'm gonna go eat some lunch.